Now that there are too many streaming services and they're getting more and more expensive, we're taking a look at some of the best and worst horror movies across Netflix, Amazon Prime, Shudder, Crackle, and so on to see, are they worth buying a physical copy to preserve? I'm Rob from the Masters of Nonsense, and I watched Fright Night on Pluto TV. Is this movie worth buying a physical copy to preserve? I'll cover this in the only way that I know how, using wrestling lingo. The Gimmick. Fright Night was released in 1985. A synopsis of the movie is, a teenager believes that the new person moving into his neighborhood is a vampire. He turns to an actor in a television horror show to help him deal with the undead. This is my first time seeing this movie, and before going into it, I only knew of the poster art, which is really cool. And before watching it, I did watch the trailer to see what I'm getting into, and it did a great job of selling this movie. So let's get right into it.
3 minutes and we're out of here.
I have a short attention span. With little time to spare, I make my initial judgment on a movie based on the first 3 minutes of the film. And here's what happens in the first 3 minutes of Fright Night. We have a voiceover shots that are going on while we see the outside of a house in a neighborhood, and there's dialogue between two people, which is clearly leading to a person and a vampire. The camera pans into a house to reveal that the dialogue is coming from a TV as two teens are making out on the floor. This all leads to the big reveal, which is Marcy Darcy. Spotfest. I'll start off by saying that I never got vampires. It's a genre of horror that doesn't appeal to me at all. So I went into this movie with intrigue but wasn't expecting too much. The trailer did set up a bombastic action horror movie that got me interested, but it was a little bit jarring for me to go into that and then watch the first half of this because I felt like the movie itself dragged on a bit. There's a whole lot of necessary setup to get into the story, and to me, they kind of crawled through those beats. And I know this is part of the gimmick, but the whole TV show host getting involved with the vampires was an odd choice to me, but it felt like it was going a little bit over the top in campiness overall. I did understand it a little bit more because we are supposed to see this through the eyes of teenagers, and they would be the ones to believe that a TV show personality would actually be a real vampire hunter. Also, I did appreciate the fact that this negated a lot of the normal setup that you see just learning about vampires because we have a supposed expert with the teenagers at that time. And a little over halfway through this movie, there's a massive tonal shift. The movie went from a light suspense comedy movie with little action to an absolute horror spot fest, which made me turn complete babyface on the movie. The practical effects were amazing and far better than anything that current technology can do 38 years since the release of this movie. And that werewolf scene is one of the longest death scenes that I've seen in any movie. That moment is put on par with the effects of an American Werewolf in London transformation scene, and it really caught me by surprise and really sucked me into the movie. I have to say though, that after watching this, the movie slightly sold me on vampires. Due to my lack of interest in vampires in general, I haven't seen a lot of vampire movies, and I'm actually reconsidering it. What got to me is that it feels like this is a more personal horror than general. Having a supernatural being that is specifically going out to kill you adds a lot to the terror factor that I didn't appreciate before, and I'm starting to appreciate now thanks to Fright Night. The Big Leg. Fright Night was a box office and critical success. So much so that there was a sequel to the movie Fright Night Part 2. The movie's cult following was strong enough to warrant a remake that came out in 2011, along with a sequel of the remake that came out a couple years later. I appreciate the movie's cult status, but I'm more curious about the remake now. The original Fright Night was great, but it feels like a movie of its time. I'm really not sure how it translates into a more modern take, and I really do want to check it out to see how did they pull it off. Going home. I mentioned earlier that I watched this movie on Pluto TV on demand, and as of my viewing, that's the only place that you can watch this movie for free. There were a few ad breaks throughout, and the longer breaks were happening toward the beginning of the movie. And that actually made this first half of the movie feel even slower and was taking away some of my interest in the movie overall. But thankfully, the breaks started to get shorter and shorter as the movie went on, and most of the last half of the movie was uninterrupted, which I really liked because the last half of the movie was amazing. So let's see what you get if you were to buy this on Blu-ray today. 4K digital restoration, a long-form documentary from 2016, 3 features with the writers and cast members, a reunion panel with cast and crew, EPKs, stills, memorabilia, so on. There's a lot here. As someone who's watched very few vampire movies, I can confidently say that Fright Night is my favorite vampire movie of all time. Granted, I haven't seen the likes of From Dusk Till Dawn or 30 Days of Night, which I do plan on watching in the future. And I'm also really interested to see the Fright Night remake to see how did they pull it off. So let's get to the decision. Is this movie worth streaming or owning? I don't see myself revisiting the movie itself often, but I am interested in seeing all the making ofs and conversations around the film. Plus, since this is only available on Pluto TV as of my viewing, I worry that this movie will become harder and harder to find as time goes on. So I want to be able to celebrate this movie and everything that they have done with it. Fright Night is a certified own movie for me, and that's why I can't wait to pop this open and check it out. Let's call for the bell because now we have our decision. This movie takes an official spot on the Masters of Nonsense movie shelf. Are you thinking about getting this movie now? Do you think the decision should be overturned? Let us know by joining the discussion on all of our social media available on this screen. Like, subscribe, repeat. Always repeat.